This is a story about losing. In 1940, a superhero arrived on American newsstands who could run faster than anything alive. He was fast enough to catch bullets. Fast enough to outrun aircraft. And he was 2 months too late. The Flash had already beaten him to the punch, and that head start decided which of them the world would remember for the next 80 years. But the hero who lost that race still holds a record nobody talks about. And the way he came to exist in the first place is one of the strangest origin stories in comics, because he wasn't created to be a hero at all. He was created to justify a title. A title borrowed from a car. Look at the top left corner of this cover. A little banner, wedged in at an angle, reading, "Meet Silver Streak, Speed Ace." Below it, in the corner, the words, "New Number." This is Silver Streak Comics number 3, cover dated March 1940. And that banner is an advertisement, because the hero whose name is printed in enormous red letters across the top of this comic is appearing inside it for the very first time. The book had already been on sale for 4 months without him. To understand how that happened, we have to start with a car. By the autumn of 1939, the American comic book business had gone completely feral. Superman had landed the year before and sold in numbers nobody in publishing could explain. Within months, every printer, pulp house and hustler with access to paper was trying to get a costumed character onto a spinner rack. Companies appeared out of nothing. Many of them were not really publishers at all, they were businessmen who had noticed a gold rush and wanted a claim. Which is exactly what happened here. The man who launched our hero's comic was not a comics man. He sold on instinct. And his instinct was his automobile. December 1939. Silver Streak Comics number 1, published by Rhoda Publications, a company run by a businessman named Arthur Bernhard. Look at that title. It sounds like a superhero. It is shaped exactly like a superhero name. It is not. The title was taken from Bernhardt's car, a Pontiac Silver Streak, one of the most recognizable American automobiles of the late 1930s, named for the chrome band that ran down its hood. Bernhard liked the sound of it, put it on the cover of a comic book, and printed it. There was no character called Silver Streak inside. So for its first 2 issues, this comic carried the name of a superhero who did not exist. Instead, the book was a grab bag, the way almost every early comic was, an anthology of whatever features the publisher could buy cheaply. Adventure serials. Detective strips. A boy inventor. A jungle man. And, tucked away in issue number 1, something genuinely remarkable that nobody involved seems to have recognized at the time, one of the great villains of the entire Golden Age, drawn by a 24-year-old artist who would go on to become one of the most gifted cartoonists America ever produced. This is the Claw. He debuted in that first issue, created by Jack Cole, and he is enormous, not metaphorically, literally. The Claw could grow to the height of a skyscraper, and Cole drew him doing it, a grinning yellow giant with talons and fangs, wading through cities. He is grotesque, he is a product of the racial caricature that ran through American wartime comics, and he is also, visually, one of the most alarming things anyone put on a page in 1939. Remember Jack Cole's name. He is the reason this comic matters. 2 issues went out under that borrowed name. They did not set the world alight. Rhoda Publications had a title with a great hook and nothing behind it, a marquee with no headliner. And in early 1940, the book changed hands. It was taken over by a publisher who did understand comics, who had strong opinions about what they were for, and who would eventually become one of the most controversial figures in the entire industry. His name was Lev Gleason. And with issue number 3, he did the obvious thing that nobody had bothered to do yet. He invented the hero. Silver Streak, the character, first appears in Silver Streak Comics number 3, cover dated March 1940. Written by Joe Simon, drawn by Jack Binder. Joe Simon is a name worth pausing on. Within a year of this, working with Jack Kirby, he would co-create Captain America and change the shape of the industry. Here he is doing rush work, reverse engineering a character from a car-derived title someone else had already printed. And the origin he came up with is, by any reasonable standard, completely deranged. Comics historian Greg Sadowski called Silver Streak's origin one of the most contrived and convoluted stories of the early Golden Age, and that is putting it kindly. It reads like 4 different ideas stapled together under deadline, which is almost certainly what it was. But watch what it does, because buried inside the nonsense is a decision that made this character the first at something real. Here is what happens. An unnamed taxi driver answers a call for a racing driver. The car he would be driving is called the Silver Streak, so the automobile is still in the story, right there at the center of it, the title insisting on itself. But there is a problem with the job. Every previous driver of the Silver Streak has been killed. Not in ordinary accidents. Something has been hunting them. And what has been hunting them is where the story stops making any conventional sense at all. A mad scientist called Dr. Catan has built a giant fly, and he has been using it to kill the drivers. That is the plot. A monstrous insect, engineered by a villain, murdering racing drivers one after another. 1940 comics did not trouble themselves with why. The giant fly exists because a giant fly is arresting to look at on a page you have 8 seconds to sell from a rack. And our taxi driver is about to get in the car anyway. Before the race, a mysterious swami hypnotizes him. Not to control him, to convince him. The swami tells him he is the strongest, bravest, fastest man in the world, and plants that conviction in his mind. Then the race happens. The driver crashes. And by every appearance, he dies. What follows is the part that turns a pulp serial into a superhero comic. The swami revives him, using what the story calls mystical powers, and in the process the hypnosis becomes permanent. He wakes up believing he is the fastest man alive, and because the belief is now permanent and mystically enforced, he is. That is his power source, a hypnotic suggestion that refused to wear off. And here is the detail that matters, the thing this character genuinely did first. He didn't only run. He flew. Silver Streak had super speed and flight together, as a package, in March of 1940. That combination, the speedster who takes off, had not been done before. Now the loss. Flash Comics #1 went on sale on the 20th of November, 1939, cover dated January 1940, created by Gardner Fox and Harry Lampert. Jay Garrick, the original Flash, got there first. Silver Streak, cover dated March, is generally reckoned the second speed-powered superhero in comic books, trailing the Flash by roughly 2 months. 2 months. In a medium where being first is the entire currency of memory, he missed it by the width of a printing schedule. But that is only half the ledger. Being second to the Flash cost him the history books. The flying, though, nobody had put those 2 powers on one character before. Johnny Quick, the DC speedster who could fly by reciting a mathematical formula, arrived in 1941, more than a year later. So the accidental hero, invented in a hurry to justify a title lifted from a Pontiac, quietly established a template that superhero comics have used ever since. He just never got the credit, because the credit had already gone to somebody faster off the line. He picked up a supporting cast fast, in the way Golden Age heroes did, by accretion, 1 issue at a time, with very little planning. First came the kid sidekick. He was introduced as Mercury, which is a perfectly good name for a fast character, and then almost immediately became Meteor instead, which is a slightly worse one. Nobody explained the change. This was an industry where a character could be renamed between issues because someone in the office preferred the sound of it, and the readers were simply expected to keep up. And then there is Wiz. Wiz is a falcon. Silver Streak gives the bird a blood transfusion, and the transfusion grants the falcon super speed. I want to be precise about this, because it is the single most 1940 sentence in this entire story. The hero shares his blood with a bird of prey, and the bird becomes a superhero too. No further explanation is offered. Wiz simply joins the cast. If you have ever wondered how strange mainstream comics were before anyone decided there were rules, this is how strange. And then the strip got good. By Silver Streak Comics #5, July 1940, Jack Cole, the young artist who had drawn the Claw in issue 1, was writing and drawing Silver Streak himself. Cole had been hired by Lev Gleason in 1939, and his responsibilities included editing this very comic. One of his first tasks in the job was to take a newly created hero called Daredevil and revamp him. Hold that thought, because it matters enormously in a moment. What Cole brought was motion. Look at how a page like this is built. The figures don't stand and pose, they whip through the panel, elastic and off balance, with the panel borders themselves treated as something to crash through. Cole drew speed better than almost anyone working, which made him a natural fit for a character whose only real idea was speed. Under him, Silver Streak stopped being a name on a cover and became a comic somebody was actually making choices in. And in that same issue, number 5, he did something I find genuinely moving. Across the bottom of the splash page, inside a great red circle, with a small drawing of himself in the corner, the artist writes a letter to the reader. Dear friend. There are some things you ought to know about Silver Streak, the real Silver Streak, as I know him and draw him. He tells them not to think of the character only as a man endowed with the speed of lightning, but to think of his character, the motive behind his actions. Could Silver Streak ever be real? To me, he writes, Silver Streak is real, yes, as real as the ideals you and I dream of. He is strong because he is right. He is fast because he needs speed to conquer his enemies. Silver Streak is my hero, and I hope he is your hero too. And then he signs it, with a name that isn't his. Ralph Johns was a pseudonym Jack Cole had been using since his days in Harry Chesler's shop, and he kept using it here. The most sincere thing in the comic is signed with a fake name. 2 months after that, this comic did something far more important than anything its title character ever managed. Silver Streak Comics number 6, 1940, introduced the original Daredevil, the mute, boomerang-throwing hero in blue and red who would go on to headline his own book, Fight the Claw in one of the most famous serials of the era, and eventually be so completely erased that Marvel could reuse his name 24 years later without anyone blinking. We made a whole film about him. The point here is where he came from. He came from the back pages of a comic named after a Pontiac. That is the pattern of this title's whole life. Silver Streak Comics was never really about Silver Streak. It was a workshop, a place where an extraordinary roster of talent passed through and made things that outlived the book. Jack Cole, Joe Simon, Jack Binder, Dick Briefer, who would go on to a celebrated run of Frankenstein comics, Don Rico, Bob Wood, Charles Biro. The title character was the landlord. Everyone else was doing the interesting work in the rooms upstairs. And then the best of them left. In August 1941, Jack Cole launched a new character at Quality Comics, a crook caught in a chemical spill who becomes infinitely stretchable, infinitely elastic, and completely uninterested in behaving like other superheroes. Plastic Man. It was an immediate hit, took over as the lead feature of its anthology, and by 1943 had its own title. Cole had found the thing his talent was actually built for, comedy, rubber physics, panels that misbehave, and he never came back to the Speed Ace. His career after comics is remarkable. From 1954 he drew for Playboy, and had at least one piece in the magazine every single month for the rest of his life, full color, painted, sophisticated work, a world away from 10-cent superheroes. In 1958 he launched his own syndicated newspaper strip, Betsy and Me. He was 43 years old, at the top of a field he had helped invent, and he had just won the kind of independence every cartoonist of his generation wanted. On the 13th of August, 1958, Jack Cole took his own life. He was 43. He had posted letters to his wife, Dorothy, and to Hugh Hefner beforehand. The contents have never fully explained it. He was successful, he was working, he had just started the strip he'd wanted for years, and no account since has made sense of the decision. It is still described as one of the great unresolved mysteries in 20th-century American cartooning, and it is worth saying plainly that this is a real person's death, not a piece of trivia. The man who made Silver Streak worth reading is remembered mostly for Plastic Man, and remembered least for how little anyone understood him. Back in the comic, the 1940s turned against costumed heroes generally. The war ended, the audience aged, and the appetite for men in capes collapsed across the whole industry. Silver Streak's own run wound down. He made his last regular appearances in the early 40s, turned up in another Gleason title called Dime Comics in 1945, and then in 1946 the title briefly came back for 2 more issues, numbers 22 and 23, before stopping for good in November of that year. But the title itself did not die. It mutated. After issue 21, Silver Streak Comics was renamed, and what it became was Crime Does Not Pay. If you know anything about the history of American comic censorship, you just felt the floor move. Crime Does Not Pay, edited by Charles Biro and Bob Wood out of the same office that had published this Speedster, invented the crime comic as a mass-market form. It sold in the millions. It spawned 100 imitators. And it became Exhibit A for everyone who wanted comics investigated, regulated, and burned. The moral panic of the 1950s, the Senate hearings, the comics code that reshaped what the medium was allowed to be for the next 30 years, the crime comics boom that Crime Does Not Pay started was at the heart of all of it. So the comic that began as a car badge on a cover ended, by direct line of succession, as one of the most consequential and most attacked titles in the industry's history. Silver Streak was long gone by then. His book outlived him and became infamous without him. As for the hero, he did what most Golden Age heroes did. He stopped. No cancellation announcement, no final issue, no send-off, the features simply weren't commissioned anymore and the character stopped being drawn. And then the copyrights lapsed. Nobody at a defunct publisher filed the renewals, because there was no publisher left to file them and nothing anyone thought worth renewing. Silver Streak fell into the public domain, which in comics is a strange kind of afterlife. It means anyone can use you, and therefore nobody has to. He has been revived, in the scattered way public domain characters are. Roy Thomas played with a version called the Scarlet Streak in Alter Ego in the 1980s. He turned up in Savage Dragon and in flashbacks in Project Superpowers in 2008. And in 2009, Eric Larson's next issue project did the loveliest thing anyone has done for him, they published Silver Streak Comics number 24. Picking the series up at the exact issue number where it stopped, 63 years late, as though the gap had simply been a scheduling problem. Why did he vanish so completely, when the Flash, who is, functionally, the same idea, became one of the most valuable characters in the world? Partly the 2 months. Partly that DC survived and Lev Gleason didn't. But mostly this, the Flash was built as a character and Silver Streak was built as a justification. One was made because someone wanted him to exist. The other was made because the name was already printed on the cover and something had to fill it. Audiences can feel that difference, even when they can't articulate it. So here is the ledger. He was named after a car. He was invented backwards, from a title someone else had already printed. He lost the race that would have made him famous by about 8 weeks. He was first at something real, and nobody noticed. And the book that carried his name gave American comics the original Daredevil, one of its greatest villains, one of its finest cartoonists, and the single most controversial title of the pre-code era. That is a considerable legacy for a hero whose entire existence was an act of retroactive justification. Every comic shown here is in the public domain, and every issue of Silver Streak Comics is sitting on the Internet Archive right now, free and legal to read. Go and look at Jack Cole's pages in issue 5. They are better than they have any right to be. If you want more of the heroes who got there first, or nearly first, and were forgotten anyway, subscribe, because that is the entire point of this channel. Next time, the archer who beat Green Arrow to the newsstand by 3 full years.